Hi, this is all the chapters of history. Have you heard the land of the chrysanthemum and the sword? This expression refers to Japan. Japan, which had a samurai culture and became the first imperial country in Asia, and also became the first Asian country to be ranked as an advanced country in modern history, is also consumed as a symbolic image of Orientalism in the Western world. Then how much do you know about Japanese history? Let's begin all the chapters of Japan history. Unlike China and Korea, Japan had not been able to establish a unified dynasty since the beginning of history. The decentralization phenomenon was very severe, and it took a very long time for local governments to centralize into one government. This was because of following Japan's history. The Neolithic Age in Japan is called Jomon period, and the Bronze Age is called Yayoi period. In general, other civilizations around the world started farming during the Neolithic Age, but not in Japan. During Jomon period in Japan, earthenware production preceded agriculture. As Japanese Neolithic pottery has a common feature of stripe patterns, that's why Japan's Neolithic Age is called Jomon, as a pronunciation of the stripe patterns in Japanese. If you look at the distribution map of Jomon period's main historical sites, they are all concentrated on the northeastern coast of Japan. Japan's Jomon period is still believed to have expanded to the Neolithic period as people from the north descended during the Ice Age when Japan was connected to the continent. Agriculture in Japan began in the Bronze Age, as plain-patterned earthenware was found in a place called Yayoi in Tokyo, rather than the Jomon-style stripe patterns earthenware. That's why Japan's Bronze Age is called Yayoi. Yayoi period in Japan lasted about 500 to 600 years, from 300 BC to the 3rd century AD. The development of Japan's prehistory was somewhat delayed compared to China and Korea. The birthplace of the Yayoi period is Kitakyushu on the southern Kyushu island. Kitakyushu was the first place to start rice farming in Japan. This is believed to have opened the Yayoi period in the south, different from Jomon period in the north. The group that introduced rice farming to Japan and founded the Yayoi period is presumed to be a group of Korean arrivals. Japanese anthropologist Kazuro Haniwara says that the current Japanese were created through repeated mixed race between immigrants from the Korean peninsula and Japanese natives. During the Yayoi period of the Bronze Age, a social class system was formed by starting farming, and the scale of settlement grew gradually, developed into a village and a political unit. These primitive forms of political units are further developed into smaller countries called kuni. By 100 BC, there were about 100 kunis in Japan. That's why Japan was bound to be decentralized from the beginning of history. From around 30 BC, ironware also spread to Japan. Japan had not yet skills to make its own ironware. The ironware that spread to Japan at this time was from Kaya, a tribal country in Korea. More than 300 years later, and by the 3rd century AD, the number of kuni in the Japan was roughly 30 or so. Among them, the most powerful kuni was Yamatai kuni. Yamatai kuni's location is still unknown. It is supposed to be one of the two areas. One is Kyushu Island, where the Yayoi period began, and the other is the Kinai area near Osaka on Honshu Island. Currently, we believe that the two arguments have been compromised, starting in Kyushu and moved to the Kinai. You know, in Japan, there is Japanese Emperor Tenno, which has been handed down from ancient myths to this day. The first Tenno is Jinmu Tenno, a mythical figure rather than a historical figure. Japanese mythology says that Jinmu Tenno, who was born on Kyushu Island, became the Japanese emperor after going on an expedition to the Kinai region of Honshu Island. It is interpreted that this implies the direction of Yamatai kuni's movement, which later developed into the Yamato kingship. The period from the 3rd century to the 6th century in Japan is called the Kofun period. Kofun is the Japanese pronunciation of tomb. From around the 3rd century, a unique style of ancient tombs appeared on Kyushu Island and in the south-central part of Japan. It is a large tomb that symbolizes the authority of the ruling class, and it is made of a square at the head and a rounded at the foot, which looks like a key. These tomb styles are also believed to have been introduced from the southern parts of Korea. Yamatai-kuni developed into the Yamato kingship through the Kofun period. Today, the Yamato kingship located in the Kinai area, which refers to the Osaka-Kyoto neighborhood, began exchanges with Baekje in Korea around the 4th century and accepted advanced culture from Baekje. Around the 6th century, Baekje introduced Buddhism to Japan, but Japan had very strong indigenous beliefs at the time. With the acceptance of Buddhism, Yamato kingship was divided into the pro-Buddhism faction and the anti-Buddhism faction. The representative of pro-Buddhism was the Soga clan, and the representative of anti-Buddhism faction was the Mononobe clan. There was a civil war between the two clans. Soga clan won this civil war, and in 587, Japan officially authorized Buddhism. Soga clan, which seized power, established figurehead Tenno and put Prince Shotoku, who was a royal family, as regent. Prince Shotoku maintained close relations with Koguro and Baekje in Korea and actively embraced Buddhist culture from the two countries. This age is called the Asuka period, when entered an era of Buddhist-centered culture. At this time, the temples built by Prince Shotoku had almost the same style as those of Baekje. After the death of Prince Shotoku in 622, the power of Soga clan overwhelmed the Tenno and the imperial families. Imperial families were very upset with the Soga clan. In 645, the Prince Nakanoue united the forces of the anti-Soga clan and launched a coup to oust the Soga clan. Prince Nakanoue, who became an influential figure, carried out a political reform called Taika Reform. Taika Reform, influenced by Chinese Tang Dynasty's system, was a centralized reformation, denying Japanese unique clan system, which was the basis for the existing power of indigenous aristocratic clans, and established a bureaucratic system. Because of Taika Reform, Yamato kingship is recognized as Japan's first official country. In 660, Baekje, Japan's ally, was destroyed by the Shilla in Korea and Tang Dynasty in China alliance. Prince Nakanoue set up a command on Kyushu Island and sent troops to the old Baekje land, saying he would help revive Baekje. However, in 663, a Japanese fleet of more than 400 ships fought against the Tang's naval forces at a port called Baekgangu on Korea's west coast, and all 400 ships were destroyed. In 668, Prince Nakanoue was crowned the 38th Tenno, the Tenji Tenno. From this period is called the Hakuo period. The Hakuo period was a time when culture was accepted from unified Shilla in Korea and Tang Dynasty in China. At the same time, Baekje and Koguro refugees in Japan played a big role in the creation of Hakuo culture. Previously, the Tennos of Japan referred to the king, but during the Hakuo period, they began to call themselves the emperor. The history of China and Korea are divided by their dynasties, but the history of Japan, where there was only one dynasty, divides their history according to the location of the capital. During the Yamato kingship, the capital was not fixed in one city because each Tenno lived in a different palace. In 701, during the reign of Empress Genmei Tenno, the 43rd Tenno, the capital was fixed in a city when she built a new palace, Heizokyo, which is now city Nara. The period from 701 to 794 is called the Nara period. Heizokyo of Nara was a checkerboard-style planned city influenced by the Chinese Tang Dynasty's capital, Chang'an. The 8th century was a time to share East Asian culture, not only Japan but also Korea's unified Shilla and Balhae, centering on China's Tang Dynasty, which was the most advanced country in Asia at the time. Japan also periodically sent envoys to the Tang Dynasty, to Silla, and to Parhe, providing tributes and actively accepted advanced culture. Thanks to such active international exchanges between East Asian countries, a universal culture in East Asia was created. In addition, East Asian countries have created their own cultures, and nationalism broke out in Japan. Since Nara period, Japan formalized the national name Japan and compiled their national ancient history book Nihon Shoki and Koseki. But these two history books are covered in myths and do not guarantee their credibility. There is a relic representing the Nara period, the temple called Todaiji. Todaiji's Great Buddha Hall is the largest wooden structure in the world, and the Buddha statue enshrined in the Great Buddha Hall is 15 meters high and weighs nearly 500 tons. In 794, Emperor Kanmu Tenno, the fifth Tenno, moved the capital to Heian-kyo, which is now Kyoto. As Japanese ancient history is classified according to the location of the capital, Japanese ancient history is largely classified into the Yamato kingship, the Nara period, and the Heian period. The aristocratic culture, which developed from the Nara period, exploded further in the Heian period, and the aristocratic class grew significantly. There were many things in each province, so aristocrats and clans destroyed the land system of Japan by increasing the number of their manors. The Fujiwara clan, which was the most powerful among the nobles, even competed with the royal family. Queens, the wives of Tenno, were mostly from the Fujiwara clan. Fujiwara clan also reigned as regent. On the other hand, culturally, nationalism, which continued from the Nara period, developed further in the Heian period, and the national-style culture was born. Japan stopped sending envoys to Tang Dynasty, Silla, and Parhe. The Japanese character kana was also created during the Heian period. Although the Fujiwara clan enjoyed the power for over 100 years, as the queens from the Fujiwara clan failed to bear sons, the clan began to fall. The 72nd Emperor Shirakusa Tenno created the Father Emperor system and ended the Fujiwara clan's long reign of regency. Then, the Japanese court and aristocrats were divided into the current Tenno faction and the Father Emperor faction and confronted each other. The capital Heian was inhabited by upper-ranking aristocrats, and military commanders of middle and lower aristocrats were distributed in local provinces. The local military commanders gradually transformed into private military groups and grew into samurai. In the capital Heian, the upper aristocrats, which divided into the Tenno faction and the Father Emperor faction, hired samurais respectively to fight each other. The word samurai itself means to escort upper aristocrats. The Minamoto clan and Daira clan were the two samurai clans who grew up serving upper aristocrats in the capital Heian. The two clans eventually clashed, and the Minamoto clan won. However, Minamoto Yoritomo, the head of the Minamoto clan, took power after purging all the Tenno faction and the Father Emperor faction aristocrats. Minamoto Yoritomo forced Tenno to be appointed to the first shogun in 1192. In Japan, the era of samurai is called the shogunate. During the shogunate period, Tenno had no power and everything in the country was controlled by the shogun, who was at the peak of the samurai. There were three shogunate periods in Japanese history. The first period was the Kamakura shogunate, which was founded by Minamoto Yoritomo. Tenno stayed in Kyoto and Shogun stayed in city Kamakura. Minamoto Yoritomo sent shogun's samurai vessels, also known as gokenins, across the country to strengthen control over the provinces. But there was a civil war between these gokenins. Shogun lost his powers and the gokenins established their collective ruling system. Samurais had their manor called Jito. As there was a strong decentralization tendency in Japan, the Japanese feudal system began when samurais from each local region inherited their Jito to their children or vassals. In 1274 and 1281, the Goryeo of Korea, Yuan dynasty of Mongol ally, invaded Japan. The battlefield was limited to Kyushu Island, and the Goryeo-Wian dynasty line collapsed due to the typhoon, but the Kamakura shogunate used too much national power in preparation for the war. Later expanded its military to the point where it was too much to handle the fear of another invasion. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the Tenno's royal family overthrew the Kamakura shogunate. Taking advantage of the weakening of the Gokenin collective ruling system because of the excessive consumption of national power, the 96th emperor Go-Daigo Tenno overthrew the Kamakura shogunate. In the process of overthrowing the Kamakura shogunate, Go-Daigo Tenno also mobilized samurais. Ashikaga Takauji, the samurai who took the lead in overthrowing the Kamakura shogunate, betrayed Go-Daigo Tenno in 1336 and took control of Kyoto. Go-Daigo Tenno escaped Kyoto and fled to Yoshino. Ashikaga Takauji established a new Tenno in Kyoto and was appointed to the shogun, opening the second shogunate, the Muromachi shogunate. The place where shogun stayed was Muromachi in Kyoto. Hence, Japan had two governments, Kyoto in the north and Yoshino in the south, which is called the northern and southern dynasties of Japan. While the Japanese government was divided into northern and southern, as the central government's local control was weakened, notorious Japanese pirates emerged based on Kyushu Island. Japanese pirates invaded Goryeo of Korea and Ming Dynasty of China constantly. The Ming Dynasty of China gave the Muromachi shogunate full trade rights as a countermeasure against Japanese pirates. If the Muromachi shogunate monopolizes the Ming trade rights, that meant the Japanese pirates caused the Muromachi shogunate's economic loss, so the Muromachi shogunate had no choice but to control the Japanese pirates. In 1392, Ashikaga Yoshimitsu, the third shogun of the Muromachi shogunate, merged the southern dynasty and unified Japan. The chronic decentralization following the Japanese feudal system continued. The expansion of the manner of the local clan, which had been prevalent already before the shogunate era, and the Japanese feudal system gave birth to the existence of a feudal lords. These feudal lords are called daimyo. Among the daimyos, the former members of the shogun's vassals were called shugo daimyo. These shugo daimyos formed an independent feudal government by colluding with the local clans. The shoguns of the Muromachi shogunate could not control those daimyos. There were some shoguns who were assassinated by daimyos. As shugo daimyos participated in the dispute over the succession of shogun, a civil war between shogun daimyos, the Onin War, occurred. Onin War was a clear example of how shogun could not properly govern Japan. Daimyos across the country were very disappointed by the shogun's weakened rule and more inclined not to obey shogun's orders. The shogun's prestige in Kyoto fell and Japan moved into the Sengoku period when daimyos from all over the country competed for only one hegemony. Sengoku period is the era when daimyos from all over the country fought in a neck-and-neck race. During the Sengoku period, the Western flintlock was introduced in Japan, and as Japan succeeded in producing its own flintlock, the war in the Sengoku period became much more intense than in previous history. The early main battlefield of the Sengoku period was in the Kanto region. The biggest mode of confrontation was the fight between Takeda Shingen and Uesigi Kenshin. However, in 1568, Oda Nobunaga, a small daimyo in the Owari province near the capital Kyoto, entered the capital Kyoto and founded new shogun at his own will, taking control of Kyoto. Oda Nobunaga formed an alliance with Tokugawa Ieyasu, a daimyo in the Mikawa province, and they took over the Kinai region near the capital Kyoto. All the daimyos across the country drew attention to Oda Nobunaga, and he was bound to be the target of everyone. The great daimyo in the Kanto region, Takeda Shingen, headed to Kyoto to attack Oda Nobunaga. Tokugawa Ieyasu, an ally of Oda Nobunaga, fought the Battle of Mikatagara, stopping Takeda Shingen, but Tokugawa Ieyasu was defeated. At the moment Takeda Shingen tried to subdue Oda Nobunaga, Takeda Shingen died in 1573 because of his usual tuberculosis. Actually, Takeda Shingen headed to Kyoto because Shogun Ashikaga Yoshiaki, who was founded by Oda Nobunaga, asked for support. Ashikaga Yoshiaki was dissatisfied though his throne as shogun, since Oda Nobunaga was more powerful than him. After the death of Takeda Shingen, Oda Nobunaga set Kyoto ablaze and deposed Yoshikaga Yoshiaki from shogun. Oda Nobunaga didn't appoint a new shogun, which officially brought the end of the Muromachi shogunate. In 1575, Takeda Katsuri, the son of Takeda Shingen, fought again in the Battle of Nagashino with Oda Tokugawa alliance. 12,000 soldiers of the Takeda's 15,000 soldiers were killed, and the Takeda clan fell completely. The Battle of Nagashino is known as the first large-scale gun battle in Japanese history, and it is said that the troops of the cavalry center Takeda were shot dead by gunfire for 8 hours. After the fall of Takeda clan, Uesugi Kenshin, another giant daimyo in Kanto, moved on. In 1578, Uesugi Kenshin smashed 70,000 troops of Oda Nobunaga at the Battle of Tedorigawa. The moment Uesugi Kenshin attempted to subdue Oda Nobunaga, Uesugi Kenshin suddenly died of cerebral hemorrhage. After seizing power, Oda Nobunaga encouraged commerce based on the Azuchi castle that he built, and he was also friendly with Catholic. There was no daimyo that could now threaten Oda Nobunaga. The Mori clan in the west remained, so Oda Nobunaga sent his vassal Hashiba Hideyoshi to subdue. However, without seeing the subjugation of the Mori clan, in 1582, Oda Nobunaga was killed by the betrayal of his vassal in a temple called Honnoji. When the news of Oda Nobunaga's death spread, Hashiba Hideyoshi, who was fighting with Mori clan in the west, hurriedly withdrew and killed Oda's perpetrator. Then he also moved Oda's family, taking over Nobunaga's power. Tokugawa Ieyasu also decided not to fight unnecessarily and to offer loyalty to Hashiba Hideyoshi. Tokugawa Ieyasu had to offer his Mikawa province, which was his estate, in a sense of loyalty. Instead, he was given a swampy estate adjacent to the Eastern Sea, and although it was unfair, Tokugawa had to clear the swamp and succeeded in turning the area where there was nothing into a city. This city is now Tokyo. Hashiba Hideyoshi changed his name to Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Toyotomi Hideyoshi unified areas that Oda Nobunaga had not yet completed. Toyotomi Hideyoshi completed the unification of Japan in 1591. The following year, in 1592, Toyotomi Hideyoshi invaded Joseon in Korea and started the Imjin War. Toyotomi Hideyoshi screwed up his everything by 7 years of Imjin War. He died in 1598 and the war was over. Toyotomi Hideyoshi's wife, Yodo Tono, shot herself in Osaka Castle with her young son Toyotomi Hideyori, preparing for the possible invasion of Tokugawa Ieyasu. Ishida Mitsunari, the vassal of Toyotomi Hideyoshi, began to confront Tokugawa Ieyasu, saying he would protect the Toyotomi's family. In 1600, all the daimyos and samurais from all over Japan were divided into Ishida and Tokugawa sides and fought against each other. This is the Battle of Sekigahara. The winner of the war was Tokugawa Ieyasu. Tokugawa Ieyasu, who conquered all opponents in the Battle of Sekigahara, was appointed shogun by Tenno in 1603, marking the third shogunate era in Japanese history. The third shogunate was the Edo shogunate, which was founded by Tokugawa Ieyasu. When Tokugawa Ieyasu lost his original estate to Toyotomi Hideyoshi in the past, he pioneered the displaced swamp, which became his new estate. The city Tokugawa Ieyasu pioneered was Edo, and he stayed there. That's why the third shogunate is called Edo shogunate. In 1607, Tokugawa Ieyasu deeply apologized to Joseon for the Imjin War and restored diplomatic relations. Tokugawa Ieyasu seemed to show mercy to Toyotomi Hideyoshi's wife Yodo Tono and his son Toyotomi Hideyori, but he captured Osaka Castle in 1615. After the fall of Osaka Castle, Yodo Tono committed harakiri with his son. Tokugawa Ieyasu commanded to destroy all tributary castles except the main castle of each province in 1616 to weaken the power of the daimyos. The second shogun of Edo shogunate, Tokugawa Hidetada, pursued closed diplomacy. Seaborne trade was allowed only in China and Joseon and closed the door to the western countries, except for only the Netherlands in just one harbor, Nagasaki. Tokugawa Iemitsu, the third shogun of Edo shogunate, implemented the Sankin Kotai system, in which daimyo in each province must live in their domain and capital Edo in turns on a yearly basis. and daimyo's families should also reside in Edo. During the Edo shogunate period, the daimyo's domain was called Han, which established a shogun Han system consisting of Japan's administrative districts. The Sankin-Gotai system is interpreted that Japanese society was not centralized. Rather, the Japanese feudal system with decentralized tendency was institutionally established. Unlike the Edo shogunate, which restricted commerce and trade, commerce developed nationwide and the merchant class grew. With the growth of the merchant class, Japanese culture further developed, resulting in haiku in literature, ukiyo-e in painting, and traditional Japanese theater kabuki. However, in contrary to the growth of the merchant class, there are also the increasing number of lower-level samurais who fell as gangsters and vagabonds. As Edo shogunate did not aid lower samurais and didn't encourage commerce, both samurais and merchant class expressed their complaints. There were two local Hans that were most dissatisfied with the Edo shogunate, Satsuma Han and Choshu Han, which were both port city. In 1853, 4 U.S. warships led by Admiral Perry appeared off Edo and forced shogunate to open their ports, saying they would come back a year later for answers. Since the U.S. warships were black steamboats, Japanese called the U.S. warships kurofune. In 1854, Perry again led 9 warships and forced Japan to open their ports. The Edo shogunate accepted by compulsory force and signed Kanagawa Treaty, Japan-US Treaty of Peace and Amity. After the US, the Edo shogunate also signed trade treaties with 4 countries, the Netherlands, Russia, the United Kingdom, and France. Tenno, who was just nominal during the shogunate's long history, was very negative about opening the ports. The 121st emperor, Gomei Tenno, criticized the Edo shogunate, and he insisted on the campaign of expelling the shogunate regime and restoring Tenno's power. Satsuma Han and Choshu Han participated in this anti-shogunate movement. In 1867, Gomei Tenno died and his son Meiji Tenno was crowned. Tokugawa Yoshinobu, the Edo shogunate's 15th shogun and the last shogun, declared that he would transfer all power to Tenno rather than waging a civil war. This was the end of 700 years history of shogunate. But Satsuma Han and Choshu Han insisted on Meiji Tenno to overthrow the shogunate, saying they should destroy the Tokugawa clan. Even the shogunate government was officially terminated, the court still consisted of the people from shogunate, and Tokugawa Yoshinobu continued to hold office. On January 3, 1868, Meiji Tenno issued the formation of the new government, ordering Tokugawa Yoshinobu to return both his official duties and estates. The shogunate faction protested, and in 1868, a civil war, Boshin War between the shogunate and the anti-shogunate broke out. Edo Castle was finally captured and the shogunate was completely subjugated. Meiji Tenno moved the capital from Kyoto to Edo, and he changed the name of Edo to Tokyo, meaning the capital of the East. 3 great nobles of the Restoration from Satsuma Han and Choshu Han, who strongly insisted in modernization, encouraged the Meiji Tenno to implement modernization policies, and the modernization reform, the Meiji Restoration, was implemented. Under the Meiji Restoration, abolition of the Han system was made, and administrative districts, prefecture, were established to complete centralization. Daimyos, the lords of the province, completely disappeared. Japanese new emperor government issued a modern currency called the yen in 1871, made a railway in 1872, and implemented the universal conscription system from 1873. In 1874, Japan invaded Taiwan. In 1876, forced Joseon to open their ports through Treaty of Ganghwa Island, and destroyed the Ryukyu Kingdom incorporated into Okinawa Prefecture in 1876. However, in the course of modernization, Kagoshima and Yamaguchi began to confront each other over the treatment of the fallen samurais. A civil war called the Seinan War broke out between 2 regions in 1877. Yamaguchi won the Seinan War. The Seinan War led to the withdrawal of the first generation of the Meiji modernization called 3 Great Nobles of the Restoration, and the second generation from Yamaguchi emerged. Ito Hirobumi, the leader of the second generation, led the discussion for institutional monarchy, and Ito Hirobumi was elected as Japan's first prime minister. In 1890, the first election took place in Japan. Japan was at odds with China's Qing dynasty over the hegemony of Joseon. Then the First Sino-Japanese War broke out in 1894, and Japan won in 1895. With the victory of the First Sino-Japanese War, Japan got Taiwan and the Liaodong Peninsula. However, under pressure from Russia, Japan had to throw up the Liaodong Peninsula and took over only Taiwan. In 1904, the Russo-Japanese War broke out, and in 1905, Japan even defeated Russia. Ito Hirobumi set out to work on colonizing the Korean Empire. In 1909, Ito Hirobumi was assassinated by Korean independence activist An Jung-geun, but in 1910, Japan finally colonized Korea. In 1912, Meiji Tenno died. When World War I broke out in 1914, Japan also declared war on Germany. Japan attacked the German troops that were occupying the Shandong Peninsula of China and then took the Shandong Peninsula of China. After the war in 1918, Japan had grown to become the world's third largest shipping country by receiving reparations as a member of the victorious country and gaining benefits in the world trade market. In the 1920s, a liberal movement called Taisho Democracy developed in Japan in various aspects of politics, society, and culture. In 1926, the 124th Emperor Hirohito Tenno was crowned. Japan couldn't avoid the Great Depression of 1929. When Japan experienced an economic recession that was beyond its control, militarism spread. The Japanese Kwantung Army in Manchuria blew up the railroad in Liuqiao and drove it to work by the Chinese army. The Japanese Kwantung Army took control of Manchuria by launching the Manchurian Incident in 1931 under the pretext of this Liuqiao incident. The Japanese government also expressed strong dissatisfaction with the Japanese Kwantung Army's arbitrary operation, but public opinion in Japan, where hopelessness was prevalent due to the economic crisis, was rather favorable to the military. In 1932, the Japanese Navy had a coup, and in 1936, the Japanese Army made a coup again. Japan established itself as a militarist party and planned a war of aggression with the goal of entering China's mainland. And in 1937, Japan started the Second Sino-Japanese War. Japan fell to Nanjing, the capital of China, and after the fall of Nanjing in December 1937, Japanese army caused the Nanjing Massacre, which is considered one of the most terrible genocides in human history. At least 120,000 to 350,000 people were killed in the Nanjing Massacre, and about 60,000 to 80,000 women were raped. Japan was predominant on the Second Sino-Japanese War, but the longer the Japanese military entered inland China, the longer the supply lines became, forcing the war to become a long-term war. The United States condemned Japan's war of aggression and halted exporting resources to Japan such as steel, oil, mechanical parts. Japan was extremely short of supplies needed for the war, and Japan decided to invade Southeast Asia and the Pacific to secure resources. It meant to turn US as an enemy. Tojo Hideki, who was sworn in as prime minister in 1941, decided to have a war with the United States and attacked Pearl Harbor in Hawaii in December of that year. US, which was advocating for neutrality in World War II, declared to participate in the war. While the US was preparing for war, Japan had taken over Southeast Asia and the entire Pacific Ocean by February 1942. The Japanese called their territory the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. But in June 1942, the US took control of the Pacific Ocean by winning the Battle of Midway, where there was a large-scale battle between the Japanese Navy and the US Navy. And the US Army also moved north from Guadalcanal in northern Australia to Tara Atoll and Saipan in the Pacific. In 1944, the combined US Army and Navy took back the Philippines, then occupied Iwo Jima and Okinawa in 1945. With only the Japanese invasion left, the US dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima on August 6th and Nagasaki on August 9th, 1945. On August 15th, 1945, Hirohito Tenno broadcasted unconditional surrender on the radio and World War II ended. After the end of the war, the United States established the General Headquarters in Japan. The GHQ commander was MacArthur, and GHQ ruled Japan on behalf of the Japanese government for a while. GHQ promoted economic democratization, dismantling Japan's war criminal enterprises. GHQ also maintained the Japanese emperor Tenno system, but never intervened in politics, leaving the emperor as a symbol like today's. From May 1946 to November 1948, the War Crimes Tribunal, called the Tokyo Tribunal, was held. A few of the A-class war criminals, including Tojo Hideki, were executed, but only 28 of the A-class war criminals were charged, and most of them sentenced to prison are released. Because the War Crimes Tribunal was not done effectually, many of current Japanese right-wing politicians are descendants of war criminals at this time. GHQ abolished military factories, resulting in unemployed people on an unaffordable scale. In addition, various social problems and returnist problems overlapped. Right after the defeat, Japan's economy and society became anemic. But when communism government was established in China in 1948, the US, feeling a sense of crisis over the spread of the communist camp, recognized the importance of Japan in terms of security. The US decided to make Japan the last bastion of the liberal camp in East Asia, and the GHQ eased a lot of economic regulations. On June 25, 1950, the Korean War broke out. The US used Japan as a logistical base. The remaining military equipment in Japan was bought by the UN forces. The military factories were restarted, and the Japanese workers were employed to serve as a laborer for the Korean War. All of a sudden, jobs were created and Japan's exports increased, and foreign currency began to flow in Japan. Companies that almost collapsed after World War II had been revived since the Korean War. And as most of the GHQ's US armies, which used to stationed in Japan, moved to Korea, a gap in security happened in Japan, and the US approved Japan's formation of its own troops only for the purpose of maintaining security, which is the beginning of the self-defense forces. In 1951, the United States agreed to end the rule of GHQ through the San Francisco Peace Treaty, and in April 1952, GHQ was officially dissolved in Japan. As Japan recovered thanks to the Korean War, Japanese politics rapidly turned to the rightist, and the families of war criminals during World War II began to grow up again. Yoshida Shigeru is mentioned as the one who was armed with anti-communist ideology in the 1950s and turned Japan to the extreme rightist. The San Francisco Peace Treaty was also the works of Yoshida Shigeru. In 1955, the Liberal Democratic Party of Japan, the largest right-wing party in Japan today, was founded. Since the 1960s, Japan had seen crazy economic growth. Japan boosted its economy by investing huge amounts of money in the heavy chemical industry and technological innovation. Japan rose to the ranks of the world's most advanced countries through joining the OECD in 1964, the Tokyo Olympics in 1964, and the Osaka Expo in 1970. Prime Minister Tanaka Kakue, who served in the early 1970s, strongly pushed for the construction policy and real estate policy under the name of remodeling the Japanese archipelago. Various buildings were built in every city, and Shinkansen, the world's first high-speed train, was opened. Japan's greatest economic heyday came to a head in the 80s. Sony released Walkman in 1979 and the world's first digital camera in 1981. The Nintendo launched Famicom in 1983 and Game Boy in 1989. Animation company Toei made Galaxy Express 999 in 1978. And Dragon Ball in 1986. Miyazaki Hayao's Ghibli Studio opened in 1985. But the crazy consumption of the Japanese and excessive real estate policies created the bubble in the Japanese economy. In the meantime, the Liberal Democratic Party government continued to implement neoliberal policies, further fueling the bubble. And crucially, Japan signed a Plaza Agreement that would depreciate the US dollar and appreciate the Japanese yen. As the Plaza Agreement reduced Japan's exports, even foreign currency became scarce. Consumption and investment were out of control under the situation of an absolute shortage of liquidity funds, eventually causing Japan's bubble to collapse in 1991. The economic growth rate in the 1990s was less than that in the 1950s, and the average number of companies going bankrupt was at least 10,000 since 1992. The total amount of debt and unemployment of companies in the 90s is still an unbreakable record. In 1997, Japan eventually recorded the negative growth. In the 2000s, Japan entered an aging society. Due to the Great Recession caused by the subprime mortgage crisis from the United States in 2008, the Great East Japan earthquake and the Fukushima nuclear power plant bombing in 2011, and the Brexit incident from the UK in 2016 worsened the strong yen situation. The aftermath of the bubble burst in the 1990s continued into the 2010s, which in Japan is called the lost 30 years, and extended to the last 40 years due to COVID-19 in 2020. However, Japan's excessive negative interest rate policy had ended the strong yen and entered the weak yen. It was something Japan had been waiting for so long for, but it is not optimistic because the speed of weakening is so rapid that the word all-time weak yen comes out. When will Japan find their lost years?